first day of hurricane season arrives with a storm organizing in Florida's direction. The latest models on the re-emerging remnants of Agatha, including where and when impacts might be felt, live here on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Handyman Roofing. Hey there, folks. JB Buno here with you live on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Handyman Roofing. Great to have you with us for the season premiere of Season 4. We've got a packed panel, a lot to talk about in this first episode on Wednesday, June 1st, 2022. Let's get to all the faces, some of them familiar to you on your screen. On the top of your screen, Max Defender 8 meteorologist Rebecca Barry and Amanda Holly, who, of course, are Tracking the Tropics superfans know well, and our featured guest in an encyclopedia of weather knowledge. Joining us in the bottom right-hand portion of your screen, it's Andy Hazelton. Cannot wait to hear from Andy here in just a moment. We're going to be featuring your comments out of the Facebook Live comment section with any of the hashtags that you see on your screen, but really we know that you want to hear about Agatha, the remnants of Agatha, whether or not they are going to become Alex, our first named storm in the Atlantic of the season, and two, whether or not it's going to wreck your weekend plan. So let's give a warm Tracking the Tropics welcome to Max Defender 8 Chief Meteorologist Jeff Biridelli, joining us at the wall with the very latest on Invest 91L. Hey there, Jeff. Yeah, first day of hurricane season and right on cue, right, JB? We're talking already about the possibility of development. So let's talk about what's happening now, then we'll go through what could potentially happen as we head into the future, the impacts on Florida, and then kind of the overall scope of what may happen this upcoming season. So first things first, let's start out with Invest 91L. Now, the National Hurricane Center saying it's located just off of the coast here of the Yucatan Peninsula. It's interesting because there's a lot of inflow just to the east, and we will talk to Andy more about the possibility that there could be potentially a couple of low-level centers with this system. Right now, it's not a tropical depression or a tropical storm yet. Winds are 30 miles an hour, as you can see, and it's not very strong in terms of its pressure. So looking at the visible satellite is great because you can really see the nooks, the crannies. You can really drill down to see what's happening on a very local level, and you can see this inflow right here. So there seems to be inflow to the east of where the National Hurricane Center right now is putting the Invest location. This could be a mid-level center, but there's at least a few areas. So it clearly is kind of strung out, and it's not organized yet, which is the reason why it's not a tropical depression or a tropical storm. Now, before we talk about the chances of development there, I want to talk about this upper level low that's been basically sitting on top of the state of Florida and the most robust thunderstorm development to the east of the Bahamas here. There's a 10% chance of development with that, so we'll continue to keep you updated on that. This is obviously what we're most concerned about. There is an 80% chance of development in the next 5 days. So it's not definite, but it is likely it becomes a tropical depression and maybe even a tropical storm. But let's show you what it has to encounter. So we have a low-level circulation just off the Yucatan and lots of thunderstorms. So it has that going for it. But it's encountering some very strong wind shear in the upper levels of the atmosphere. You can see it right there. See these arrows, the yellow arrows and the red arrows. So way up there, this wind is inhibiting development and kind of pushing a lot of the convection and a lot of these clouds to the east, as you can see. So it's a lopsided system with all the convection on the eastern side, which is fairly typical when you have a lot of shear. Also, one thing I want to bring your attention to is a lot of dry air in the Gulf of Mexico. So this system, first of all, is going to have a hard time wrapping convection around the north side, and it has to contend with dry air on its north side. So wherever this storm comes ashore, the heavy rain is going to be from where the storm comes ashore and especially south, not to the north, and that really has implications for the Tampa Bay area as we head into Friday and again on Saturday. Here are the latest models. We're just showing you two of them, the GFS, the American model, and then the European model. And the European model has been decently consistent. Further to the north, better organized. Now, the latest morning model run of the GFS is a little bit further north than it was, but still not far enough north to really directly impact us here in the Tampa Bay area. And I saw on Andy's Twitter page something specifically about how they're running the GFS model a little bit differently today than they did even yesterday. And they're going to change it back tomorrow. Andy, it's a little complicated, but I do want to bring in a few seconds, or actually right now. Okay, let's talk about it. So I find it interesting that they, for one day, are running this on a new supercomputer model, but then switching it back tomorrow and then switching it back full-time to the new model run in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, so it's just a test of the new supercomputer. They're just trying to make sure there are no bugs in it. because this will be the one that's used full time going forward within a couple weeks. So, anytime early in the season, it's good to have test cases to work out all the bugs and things, whether it be the models or your data or all sorts of various things. So that's kind of what's going on with this.
I'm just kind of intellectually curious, though, why that would have any impact on the actual model run. Would it have an impact? Could it have an impact? I mean, so I should just say to everyone who's watching right now, Andy is not only flies on the Hurricane Hunters into hurricanes, but he also is in charge of making these hurricane models better. Is that right?
That's correct. So I work on model development with the University of Miami and NOAA. So we work on the HAFS model specifically, kind of a new hurricane model that's being developed. So one of the things that can happen with you might be surprised, but we run all these hurricane forecasts on supercomputers, these big clusters of lots and lots of thousands of individual computer cores. And one thing you might be surprised is if you have a slightly different computer, you can get a slightly different result just because of how the computer does the math, and rounds the numbers and things like that.
Interesting.
So it's not anything huge. I mean, it's obviously still, this morning's run of the GFS was still showing a broad, weaker system, but with most of the rain to the east, like you mentioned, because of the wind shear. So it wasn't like it was a totally unreasonable thing, but there are slight differences that can show up sometimes based on how those numbers are rounded.
That's very interesting. I bet you a lot of people watching find that interesting too, that the computer you run it on can even though the equations are the same and the model is the same, it could materialize into just slight changes. But of course, Andy, you did notice that the GFS run from this morning was just a little stronger and slightly better organized than the past few runs, and I wonder if that's a trend or just an aberration, if you will.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm looking at some of the observations, like you noted, it does look like something is trying to organize itself off the eastern tip of the Yucatan there. So if that holds, maybe we'll get something that's a little closer to what that was showing. But yeah, certainly where exactly it comes, toward Florida, like you have shown there, is going to make a big difference for rain impacts and, and overall, gusty winds. It'll all mostly be south of wherever it comes ashore, like you said.
Right. Okay. So let's go back to the maps. That I'll be doing this for another minute and a half. I'm going to bring everybody else back into the conversation. So, it really is quite the difference, right? Most of the rain you see, and by the way, this is less than an inch on the GFS, the American run. That's just everyday thunderstorm rain. That's not even really associated with what may become tropical depression and then eventually tropical storm Alex. And the GFS has been further south, although the latest run is certainly further north. Just a couple of runs ago, the heavy rain was 200 miles south over the Florida Straits. Now, the European has been pretty consistent, bringing the edge of the heaviest rain to Tampa Bay, so generally 2 to 4 inches from Tampa just north, and 4 to 8 inches to the south. And that hasn't changed very much, which I find interesting. The European has been very consistent, but it is battling every other computer model right now. The Canadian saying that it's going to be closer to what the GFS says. Something called the Icon model saying it's going to be closer to what the GFS says. But nevertheless, you can see the difference here is heavy rain in the Tampa Bay area, and especially Sarasota late Friday into Saturday, or no rain at all on the GFS. And I have to emphasize that we're talking all about this tropical system. It may completely miss the Tampa Bay area. On the other hand, even though it's not a strong storm, if it does hit us like the Euro says, there's likely to be some flooding, even though the ground, could definitely absorb a lot of rain in Sarasota. Anybody who's in Sarasota right now knows we haven't had much rain. So that's the good news if we get that heavy rain. All right, quickly to this. La Nina is going to continue this summer. Cooler than normal water temperatures in the tropical Pacific. During La Ninas, we tend to see heightened hurricane activity, and that's because we have weaker upper level flow, and so these systems can kind of fester undisturbed, and they can get stronger and stronger. We can see more of these systems take shape and become tropical storms and hurricanes. And I find it so interesting that during La Nina years, we have we just did an analysis, Andy. Eric Stone is a meteorologist. I'm looking at him off camera right now here at WFLA, and myself did this analysis and found that during the last 30 years, if you use the pretty standard criteria, that we've seen about 3 times the amount of hurricanes during La Nina. Watch this. There's El Nino. I think it's amazing the difference between the two. So clearly climate patterns really do help to dictate how a season is going to turn out. And we have a La Nina, so active season. One more thing I want to show, because this is one of the big reasons I brought you on here, Andy. the MJO and this convectively coupled Kelvin wave that we talk about. You know, back on May 24th, rising air was moving out of the area. We were getting into this, you know, large-scale pattern of sinking air, so we knew that we wouldn't see development generally in between, you know, last week or two of May or so. But we knew as soon as this rising air got into the East Pacific, we would see this spin up in the East Pacific, and then eventually that may translate to the Atlantic, which is what is happening now. So the Madden-Julian Oscillation has become, I think, you know, since I went, we didn't even know about it when I went to school. We might have known about it, but we certainly didn't talk about it. And over the past 10 years or so, this has become an instrument not only to help predict tropical activity, but also severe weather and big storms in the United States.
Yeah, definitely. This is sort of an area of cutting edge research. It's called subseasonal. So it's, you know, La Nina and El Nino we've known about for, you know, 30 years or more now. And certainly, you know, we know how those impact the seasonal factors, but the subseasonal, you know, this MJO or Kelvin waves are kind of dictate where the air will rise and sink over a period of maybe a week or 2 to 30 days as it moves, you know, from west to east across the equator. And so you can, you know, the models, if depending on how well they do with that, the large scale models, you can kind of use that to predict, you know, a couple weeks out, maybe what basin is going to be most favored for tropical activity. You can't really predict exactly where a storm might go, or, you know, with that much detail yet, but you can get a general idea for where you might be favored for hurricanes.
So if a meteorologist like myself, Amanda or Rebecca were thinking, I wonder if we can take vacation 2 weeks from now. You know, I'm not saying we want to take vacation at all, because we don't do that here. But if we wanted to, we might look at something like the MJO, because it could tell us 2 weeks out, will it be quiet, or, you know, what are the chances it'll be quiet in the Atlantic, or it might be active in the Atlantic.
Exactly. And so especially if you know seasonal factors like, you know, the ones we have this year favor an active year, and then, you know, as we get into August and September, the time of year where things are favored on average, and you see that lining up with one of these favored, you know, MJO pulses, we call them. You know, usually when those things all line up, that's a pretty good indication that you're going to have a busy period. You know, obviously right now we're just kind of getting into the start of the year, but even then you can still get a little bit of activity with these kind of things.
Well, it's the first day of hurricane season, and we're already talking about something. And we, of course, think it's going to be an active season. All the outfits that typically predict seasonal forecasts for hurricanes are saying that it is likely to be an active season. So let's bring everybody else into the conversation. Let me ask you, Amanda and Rebecca, are you able to go back to the satellite, or do you want me to manually go back to the satellite?
We should be able to take care of that.
Okay, very good.
All right, folks, let's open up the meteorologist Q&A here on Tracking the Tropics. Very simple. Use a hashtag in the Facebook Live comment section. Ask a question. We've got Jeff, Andy, Rebecca, Amanda on standby to answer your questions in the Facebook Live comment section. And let's start with this one. And Amanda, Rebecca, I don't know who wants to hop in here. Does Florida need to worry? And I'm not sure if they're talking about you know, the hurricane season at large, or they're probably talking about the remnants of Agatha. So let's answer Tina's question here. We'll start with you, Rebecca and Amanda, and perhaps we can also answer whether or not are we anticipating Alex coming out of this?
I think we'll end up with Alex out of this. I don't think we need to worry too much. We really need the rain. And none of the forecast models are really showing the chance that it would become a stronger hurricane. Now, that's not out of the question. We've all seen rapid intensification situations before. But right now, most of the forecast models are hinting at a big rainmaker for us, which we could actually use. We don't like to get it all at once, but I think we're going to be fine. What do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, it's early on in the season. This is the time of the year when we could use the storms. You know, we're coming out of the dry season, so we'll take some showers and thunderstorms. And the plus is, even if it does impact our weekend rain chances, right? They go up on Saturday, and we see that line of heavy rain kind of impact the, you know, areas south of the I-4 corridor. It's only going to be the first half of the weekend. Sunday's really not going to be affected all that much. So
yeah.
Even if we see Alex, it's not going to be a complete weekend washout.
So Bobby is asking, hashtag KJB, is that system going to develop into tropical storm, Alex? Jeff, Andy, as far as it becoming the first named storm of the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season, is there any chance that we're talking about, you know, intensification beyond a tropical storm level? Are we talking about there potentially being a hurricane in play for this weekend for those who are inevitably going to ask in our Facebook Live comment section?
Well, I want Andy to answer this, but I just want to plug Andy one more time. So, Andy, you actually fly physically into these storms, right? So you're a hurricane hunter, but on the research side, is that correct?
That's correct. So, my main job is working with the hurricane model development, but I also get to be part of the field program where we're the scientists that fly on the NOAA flights into some of these storms.
And so if you can answer that question, then I have a question to follow up. So do you think there's any chance of this becoming a hurricane? Basically, he's asking, is there any chance this can become a hurricane?
I mean, well, you never want to rule anything out 100% in this field. Right now, the models all indicate that that strong upper level wind field, the wind shear that Jeff showed, and the dry air will probably keep it to a tropical storm at most. But certainly there could still heavy rain, especially I think for the South Florida areas. Some gusty winds are possible, and with all tropical systems, you can get little quick tornadoes that spin up. So you got to take them seriously. I'm not expecting anything huge as far as intensification goes, and you always just want to make sure to look at the National Hurricane Center's website, because they have the latest on forecast thinking, and I think right now they have an 80% chance of this becoming at least a tropical storm in the next couple days.
And Rebecca and Amanda can attest to this, and Andy knows better than anyone. And man, I have nightmares about this. We all had to take tremendous amounts of calculus. I had to take differential equations, but in order to improve computer models like you're doing, the work that you do, it requires a ton of mathematics. Correct me if I'm wrong here.
That's correct. I mean, you have to at least understand what it's doing. The people, the hardcore model developers, we have to kind of understand the calculus a little bit more. The people that use it, maybe, at least kind of have a basic understanding, because there's all sorts of approximations for all this complicated math. And that's sort of what the computers are doing. When you talk about a computer model, it's all these calculations and approximations for these physical and mathematical processes that we know drive the weather.
So HAFS, H-A-F-S, can you explain how you are specifically working on the hurricane models, and are we seeing good results, and do you expect more good results pretty soon?
Yeah, so HAFS, the Hurricane Analysis and Forecast System is what that stands for. So it's basically a hurricane-specific model. So you may have heard of the something like the HWRF, the Hurricane Weather Research and Forecasting Model. That's something that's used by NOAA, the National Hurricane Center now. So HAFS will eventually, maybe as soon as next year, be sort of the replacement for that. So it's a little different from like the GFS or the American or the European model in that it's more of a hurricane-specific model with a kind of a small area called a nest of higher resolution or more detail that follows the storm as it goes across the ocean, to allow you to really get the things like the eye wall and the structure, the fine scale details better. And so we hope that allows us to get better intensity. We've been testing it in real time the last few years, and we've seen good results so far. But obviously each year is different, and you always got to test it on real cases to see how it's going to do as it gets ready for prime time.
All right, I certainly don't want to hog the conversation here, so I want to send it back to JB, Rebecca, and Amanda so they can continue the conversation with you.
Yeah, really looking forward to taking some more questions out of the Facebook Live comment section here on Tracking the Tropics. Great to have, again, Andy bringing just his wealth of knowledge, as of course, we also have Jeff. And Jeff, you're going to be able to hear from all season long here as our chief meteorologist at WFLA, all season long on Tracking the Tropics.
Whether you hate me or you like me, right?
That's we love what we see so far, Jeff. Rachel, hashtag Hey Jeff, for you specifically, wanting to know, and this goes back to some of our fans who really understand tropical development. They want to know, what is the water temperature in the Gulf, with hashtag Hey Jeff.
Yeah, so the water temperatures have been generally above normal, especially across the Gulf and parts of the Caribbean, not quite as above normal in the main development region. One thing that is interesting, and Andy, I'm assuming you must know Nick Shea pretty well, because Nick, I'm assuming your office is at AOML across the street from the University of Miami, or are you actually at the University of Miami?
My office is across the street at the NOAA lab, but yeah, I know Nick. I've talked to him about his research multiple times. Yeah, he does a lot of good work with the ocean side of this stuff. So.
Right, and I just interviewed him, and he was talking about how he was concerned about the loop current this year and how it looks a lot like it did back in 2005 during the year Wilma and Rita rapidly intensified over the loop current. So you can see the loop current right there, perhaps a little warmer, maybe a little deeper than it typically would be this time of year. And clearly, though, it doesn't really matter when you look across the Gulf of Mexico. This time of year, it's warm enough everywhere to see not only tropical development, but also rapid intensification if it were to happen.
Right, that's correct. So the ocean temperatures, if you're familiar with the tropics, you may have heard it needs to be at least 80 degrees Fahrenheit. 26 Celsius to get a hurricane to develop. And typically, if you get it up to like 82 or 83, that's enough to sustain like a major hurricane. But that's really just one factor. That you also have to think about the wind shear, those upper level winds. If those are too strong, that can keep a storm from developing, or the dry air that gets in. So the ocean temperatures are an important part, and certainly if you get a strong storm over that, that plays a big role. But it's a combination of those ocean factors and those kind of upper level winds, upper level dry air. A combination of a lot of factors all go together to how strong a storm will get.
And that's why when we talk about climate change, that's only one factor, right? So the oceans warm up and you have more energy for possibly stronger storms, but that also depends on the situation at that very moment when that storm is forming. Is it having to encounter dry air and wind shear like this system? So there's a lot of ingredients. It's not just warm waters, but certainly warm waters feed into it. All right, JB, what else do we have?
All right, we got this question coming in from Michelle on the WFLA Facebook page, Facebook Live comment section. Hello to all of our commenters joining us over there. I'm going to bring this one over to Amanda and Rebecca. #HeyJB, will there be a threat of tornadoes?
That impact is really going to be dependent on how far north this system travels. So if you're looking at the European model where you see all those oranges a little bit closer to the I-4 corridor, well, I do think that there will be that threat of, a brief spin up of a tornado. Anytime you have a tropical system coming in and you're on that right side of it, you're going to be on the threat for, a weak spin up tornado. Now, if we see more of a GFS scenario where the heaviest rain is to our south, that is where the threat for weak tornadoes will be as well.
Yeah, when those bands of rain move on shore, a lot of times that's where you see that rotation start, when it moves from the virtually frictionless environment over the ocean to starting to interact with land, and then the different boundaries that it has. That's just one of the things we watch for with systems.
We have this question. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, so it's, to wrap that up, if the system comes a little bit farther to the north, yes, there will be a low threat for tornadoes.
We've got this one coming in specifically for you, Andy, from Livia Livingston from the WFLA Facebook page. #HeyAndy. I think it's cool that you fly into the storms while doing research and wanting to know, do you fly out of Florida?
Yes, we typically do. The main NOAA hurricane base is in Lakeland, Florida, which is actually my hometown where I grew up. I was in Plant City and then Lakeland. So yeah, so that's pretty cool that I get to fly out of there. So that's where we fly into most storms. If it's a storm way out in the Atlantic, like for example, Hurricane Larry last year, we'll sometimes go out to one of the islands like St. Croix, which is in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So because it's a little bit, if a storm's further out, you have to get a little bit closer to it. So we do have, the St. Croix, or sometimes I think they'll go out of Aruba or Barbados. There are a few islands out there where we can fly out of, but usually the main one is based out of Lakeland, yes.
Let's hear it for Andy for being from Lakeland right here in the Tampa Bay area. Yeah, no, we love it. We love to see the Tampa Bay area represented, especially when we're talking about a name such as NOAA. Just looking here at some of the incredible video from NOAA, by the way, just showing you a little bit of the service that is done by the hurricane hunters. Speaking of Lakeland, not too far away, I think that there's some folks thinking about a trip over to some theme parks this weekend, Jeff. Tyler Sage from the WKRG Facebook page. This is heading over to our sister station and really southern coastal Alabama, Mobile, that area, but asking #HeyJeff, is the storm heading towards Orlando, Florida?
So Tyler's getting down to brass tacks here. I have a vacation planned in Orlando. Please don't ruin it for me. I think we're going to be okay in Orlando. The European model is the furthest north. It has the edge of the heaviest rain up against Orlando. But as Amanda said before, even if we were to get a period of heavy rain on Saturday, Sunday is likely to be fine, actually nice. And if it takes this further south track, there's the potential that we could even end up with better weather here. A couple of reasons. One, we would actually be under some sinking air that would limit the amount of rain we have possibly. And number two, and more importantly, it may actually be cloudy. And if it's cloudy, it's not as hot. And anybody who's been to Disney during the middle of the summer, well, you know why you'd like it to be cloudy. So I think you'll be fine, but again, there's that chance that some of this heavy rain could sneak up on Saturday. Sunday's the better half of the day. Hopefully you get Sunday and maybe you're staying an extra day on Monday.
We only have a couple of moments left, really maybe 2 minutes left, so we'll get to this one last one from Christine Marie Fowler from the WFLA Facebook page. Throwing it right back to you, Jeff. Pasco, how much rain are we expecting over there in Pasco County? Now, this is on the northern side of the Tampa Bay area.
Right. And it's unlikely, but not unheard of, that we might end up with some heavy rain in Pasco. As of right now, The very northern model, which is the European model, has the Tampa Bay area on the edge of the heaviest rain. Even the most northern model doesn't have much rain for Pasco, but there could be an inch. I mean, that's the way it looks right now. Of course, things could change, but it really is looking like the brunt of the heavy rain in the Tampa Bay area is going to be to the south of Tampa. And that's why I think it's so important to mention once again that it is conceivable that with a tropical storm hitting southwest Florida, we may turn out to have a pretty darn nice weekend here in the Tampa Bay area. It could go either way. It's going to be a really close call. It's also conceivable that we could see flooding in Sarasota County and a beautiful day in places like Brooksville and Newport Richey.
While we have Andy here in the final moments of the episode, any final questions that we have, Jeff, for Andy Hazelton joining us virtually?
I'm just so interested in everything that you did, Andy. You know, what do you want to talk about? Because I have a million questions, but I think what's most important is, what do you think is the most interesting work that you do and the thing that you think people would be most interested in hearing about?
Well, certainly, I really enjoy everything I get to do. The hurricane model development is really exciting because I get to be at the forefront of building these new tools that forecasters at the Hurricane Center can use to predict where the storms are going to go, how strong they're going to be. So that's really exciting. And I certainly also really enjoy getting to fly into the storms. The data we collect, it helps the National Hurricane Center know where the storm is and how strong it is right now. But then, the data we collect there also goes into these hurricane models that we're working on and helps those models be more accurate with how the storm starts, which then makes it more accurate with its predictions. So it really is cool how all the observations and models tie together. And that's one of the things that I think is really unique about the work we do here at the University of Miami and at AOML in Miami, is that we have expertise on both these observations and the models, and we all work together to sort of put all this together and make better forecasts. Ultimately, the goal of all this is to give the people, the public, anywhere that gets impacted by hurricanes, a better idea of what's going to happen so they can get prepared.
Again, it's been great to have Andy and, of course, the rest of the Tracking the Tropics team. Jeff Biridelli, our chief meteorologist, cannot wait to hear more from him over the course of the season. Amanda and Rebecca, of course, our Tracking the Tropics superfans know well. I'm JB, folks. We're going to have a lot more coverage coming your way on the remnants of Agatha on Invest 91L. What takes place really in the hours and days ahead. So keep it locked in to trackingthetropics.tv, a new URL that'll give you access to all of our coverage from the Tracking the Tropics team here at WFLA, the Max Defender 8 weather team, keeping you posted on all things Atlantic hurricane season. Again, that URL, www.trackingthetropics.tv. For Andy, Amanda, Jeff, Rebecca, I'm JB. Thanks so much for joining us. We will perhaps have additional streams on Invest 91L depending on what happens in the days ahead. But as a reminder, we are live every Wednesday during hurricane season, 2 o'clock Eastern, on whatever website, app, or social media platform that you are watching on right now as part of Nexstar Nation. For our whole Tracking the Tropics team, we'll see you next time, folks, on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Handyman Roofing.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.